back to the Intuition Incubator. Today's guest is Mel Abraham, a CPA-turned-entrepreneur, best-selling author of Building Your Money Machine and creator of The Affluence Blueprint. But Mel's not just about spreadsheets and strategies. His work was born from being a single dad who didn't want to trade presents for profit and sharpened through surviving cancer twice. He teaches people how to build real wealth, not just financial, but a life of freedom, meaning, and choice. He's been called a thought leader to thought leaders and has shared stages with Tony Robbins, Brendon Burchard, and Arianna Huffington. Get ready, incubators. This is about building a legacy from the inside out. Welcome to the show, Mel.
Oh my God. Thanks for having me here, Abby. It's so cool to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. My gosh, there's so many different directions that I could take us right now because you have such an incredible, so many incredible stories in life history. And I'm sure that a lot of them have a lot of intuitive moments to them and maybe some less intuitive moments to them. So let me start just kind of by asking, like, how did you get from finance to thought leading?
Well, I don't know if I went from finance to thought leading or vice versa. So here's the reality is that I was trying to build a consulting practice as a CPA. And what I was doing at the time was I was trying to be an expert witness and be that person that testifies at trial on financial matters.
Oh, okay.
The problem was the attorneys would not hire me because I had no experience.
Right, of course.
So they looked at me and said, "You don't have any experience." I said, "Well, that's great. If you don't hire me, I never get any experience. I might as well go flip burgers." And so what happened from there was that I said, "Well, what's the next best thing of getting cross-examination and testimony experience?" And I thought about it. I said, "Speaking." So and now we're talking about the 90s. So it was before internet really and the technology that we have today. So I started to push myself out to bar associations and CPA societies and everything to speak on my topic, to speak on my stuff. So indirectly, to build my practice, I had to get myself perceived as a thought leader in the space. And so what would happen back then, the way I did it was if I had a speaking engagement, say in Nashville, Tennessee, 2 weeks before that conference, I actually released a press release. And then a week after the conference, I released another press release. Then I took those press releases and then turned it into like a 500-word article. And I physically mailed that article to other bar associations, other CPA societies, and said, "Here's an article. You're welcome to use it. Just keep the byline in. And by the way, if you have a conference coming up, I'd love to be able to contribute to it." And what that did is I still didn't have the experience, the testimony experience, but they stopped asking because the perception, because they keep saying the press releases and the articles and the speaking, and they go, "Man, he's all over the place." And so it's kind of weird. I don't know that I got my degree in accounting. It's not really what I wanted to focus on and do. But in order to build my practice back then, I found out of necessity that I needed to position myself as a thought leader. And the vehicle that I had back then was physical mail, physical speaking, and networking. That's it. And that's what I did. That built what ended up being an international type of recognition.
It's so interesting because, I have such mixed feelings about all of this because, of course, it's what all of us are in the middle of, right? And myself included, in terms of we have to put ourselves out there in a certain way so that we're perceived a certain way. And people are perceived in a certain way. And then everybody's like, "Oh my God, they're a genius." And then if you're not perceived in that way, then there could be the greatest genius in the world, but nobody knows and nobody cares. And it's such a, with the life that we live in today, with the comparison and the all of this stuff, like, I mean, what do you have to say about that? I just get sick just thinking about it.
Well,
It's like such a, you
it's
know,
it was on that side of it, because everything wasn't on display.
yeah.
It wasn't as hard then. And the challenge today isn't that it's on display, but we don't know what's real.
Mm,
There's
mm,
so many people that create these facades. And because I am in the money space, in the financial space, and there's so many people that make the appearances that they have all this lavish wealth, what they have is stressful debt. And I know it by fact, not by conjecture, because I'm in the space and I've had conversations. I can't tell you how many people that, if you looked at them from the outside, would say, you would say, God, they got it all. But I happen to have conversations with them saying, I'm sucking wind cash flow wise. I don't know what to do. I've got nothing for my future. The things that you talk about, they don't exist in my life. I don't know how to do this. And so they're literally running trough to trough, stressed out as all get out to get there. So I think one of the challenges is what are we comparing to?
yeah.
And I think that when you start to come at it from a couple of perspectives, one, the comparison should be to our previous self. Okay.
Love it.
Two, the motivation should be a motivation of service and value. Not, and what that does is it forces us to move from transactional to relational, to look at it and say, I need to allow people to see me, but I need to allow people to feel me. I need to allow
Mm,
people, and this is a left brain dude that's kind of talking about feelings, but it's so easy to strip away the human aspect of what we do, or just business in general, given all this talk about AI and all this talk about the technology and all that stuff. Do you know that I have a separate phone, and that if someone buys a product from me, I automatically I have the system set up to send me an email with their name, the product, their phone number, the city and state that they're in or country that they're in, and
mm,
their email. And
I
I
love
take
it.
my dogs on a 4-mile walk in the morning. And a lot of times I take that phone with me and I just go down that folder, and I can't get to all of them, but I just pick one and I call them and I say, hey, I just want to say thank you for trusting me.
Wow.
And they go, like, no way, no way. And I go, but we lost that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you, and like some of the stuff that you do and all that stuff, it's humanity. And we need
Yeah.
to bring that back. And I think all the stuff that there's talking about, those that bring the human touch, that level of connection, that depth of connection back in service, in value, and not transactional, they're going to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it's so funny because, my husband is a financial advisor and I worked in his business for 12 years with him. And I was a psychotherapist. I had studied social work. And I remember going to some of the first conferences and it was like, I mean, the bling and the this and the number dropping and this quarter this and this quarter. And I always said to him, oh my God, they have so much money. And my husband always like, no, he said, I will guarantee you. He's like, I guarantee you that we have more in savings
Mm-hmm.
than they do. Like, because, particularly in the financial industry, what I learned over time too is like, a lot of those big companies, they're a marketing machine.
Yeah.
And so they're taking things for commission so that they can get the money to put on seminars so they can market, and it's just a totally different, but absolutely, like we are just so habituated into comparing ourselves. And I love what you said about the comparison should be just to your previous self.
Yeah.
Like what a brilliant, that is, audience, I just want you to take that away. If nothing else, like take that away because that is awesome, right? Like as soon as you find yourself comparing yourself to someone else, and I quote Sadhguru a lot. He said something, not this exactly, but it's like a blade of grass can't be an oak tree. It's not supposed to be.
No, no.
It's supposed to be the best blade of grass it can be. And we're all totally unique individuals. Why would I compare myself to you? Why would I do that? There's
Here's
nothing like us. We're individual people.
It's absolutely true. And I think here's the interesting thing about this. In order to compare ourselves, in most cases, we have to appreciate ourselves. We have to appreciate what we've done. We have to recognize it. We're horrible at recognizing our micro successes, to celebrate them, and we shrink them down. Now, this isn't about pounding your chest, but it's just to acknowledge. So I've been in the martial arts for decades. I had a school for 11 years. I lived and trained in Japan under a 17th generation samurai bloodline. Now, we decided at the school to put in what we called a Little Dragons program for the 3 to 5 year olds. We didn't teach them to fight. We taught them coordination and movement and all that stuff. And we did it in 6-week cycles. And what we noticed is after 2 6-week cycles, a lot of them dropped out. And so what we did, I said, I wonder why. And we started to talk to them. So they didn't have belts. They didn't have anything. They just had the bottoms and a T-shirt that said Little Dragons. So what we did is we started to take and make merit badges about whatever that theme for that 6 weeks is. And then at the end of that 6 weeks, we would do a presentation to them of their merit badge, and they would sew it on the side of their gi bottoms on their pants. And so now they're creating this ladder. The retention doubled. And the reason it doubled is because what we were doing is allowing them to reflect on how far they've come, and that we were celebrating that progress. And so when you start to do that with yourself, it's so easy to discount the journey and not look at it and say, well, it's not as big of a launch, or it's not as big as I thought. But you know what? A month ago, 2 months ago, it didn't even exist.
Right.
So why are we not celebrating that? I get that it's not easy, and you have these dreams and you want it, but nothing's final until you decide it's final.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So true. The micro things are just, and whatever they are, right? Like they don't have to be, and we can have a big discussion about this because, we agree on this idea of like, what is success really? But they don't have to be like, oh, I got the gold medal, or I got to the next level, or I learned how to kick, or whatever. It can be literally like, I didn't lose my mind like I normally would have when my husband didn't do this thing or the other, because I've really been working on this, or like, sometimes I have clients who it's really, really hard to have conversations,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, we all have our things, conflict avoidance, we've got that part or whatever. And it's like, I had this conversation. That's progress. Like to me, like I call it like relentless emergence, of self. Right. But that stuff, I mean, forget about, it's already the micro things of like, oh, I made this amount of money and it's not as much as I want, but it's this much more, forget about that. Like even just like, what kind of human am I becoming? Because to me, those are the things that I will remember the day that I first didn't feel envy at someone, because I'd worked so hard on not wanting to feel envious of people that I love. Like that's just not who I want to be.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that day. You know what I mean? Like, it means so much more to me than whatever. I did a TED Talk, whatever. Like that, I don't know how to explain it, but there's something inside myself. Like I overcame something about myself.
Well, I wonder how it is, because I think one of the other things because I did this early on, and that is how many of us don't really define or understand what we want success to look like in our life.
Yeah.
And we're taking on the definition of success because we got a degree, because of media, social media, because of siblings, because of parents, because of society's expectations. I don't do what my degree is, but I do what my life was meant to do. And I think that when we don't define the finish line, when we don't define what that is, we run a race that has no accomplishment, because unless we're on the chase, we don't feel like we're doing anything. And this is a challenge. It's easy to see in the financial space, because the initial journey for me was this: I got to hit a number, got to hit a number, got to hit a number. Hit the number. Now what? Move the number. And I kept moving the goalposts, And you wonder why I wonder why I got to a place where I go, I keep hitting the number, but I keep feeling empty.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had a dear friend teach me this lesson. I had gotten into a bike accident, and he took me, and he had retired at 37, and he said, how much is enough? And I go, what do you mean? I said, I'm in a neck brace. I can't feel on the right side, and I'm stuttering. And he's like, I'm 3 days out of the hospital. And he's like, how much is enough? And I go, why are we talking philosophy here? I got a headache. I'm like, and he says, no, I'm serious. He says, you got on that bike angry. You got on the bike distracted. You got on the bike because you don't know where your finish line. You don't know what the enough line is. And not that you will stop, but at least you will recognize that you're where you should be. And when I got to that point, it allowed me, because I'm 63, going to be 64. And, I want to do everything that I've done in the last probably decade has been by choice. And to me, that means I'm retired. That means that I'm free. But too often we decide where retirement is, or that freedom is, based on a number or an age versus a lifestyle and a stage. And but it's a gift, because I have friends that own islands.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be easy to go, oh, I want to go do that.
Yeah.
But then I go, I don't want to do that. You know what? I want to go for 6 months with my dogs and my wife and live in Tuscany. And we're planning it. That's my definition, but it's mine. And my own identical twin brother has no desire to do that. He'd rather go on a horse ranch in Idaho. And that's okay. That's him. And I think that we ought to get real and say, I'm really here to live whatever existence I have here, fully expressed, based on what I'm called to do, and allow that. And if people excel and have flashier cars, bigger homes, different lives, that's them. They're living their journey. But I think that why we see the comparison causing so much stress, and we see the cyberbullying and the suicides and all that stuff. Man, I kind of, and I don't have any data to support it, but I kind of believe that having that access to the comparison, having that access to seeing people's facades, and not being willing to go introspective internally and say, hey, I'm okay with a tent in Montana, or I'm okay with the yacht in Monaco, and saying, I'm living my life and I'm in peace.
Yeah. Yes. I have, my two sons are very, very different. I have a stepson and an older, I have 3 sons, but and my son are same age. And one of them is living in the middle of nowhere, and he's growing plants in buckets, potatoes and carrots and onions and all of those things. And, he works when he has to, and he can live on a shoe strap. And, you're on the phone with him, and he says, oh man, there's a bird cage. There's a bird nest there. Wait a minute. I got to go. I'm just going to go build a bird cage real quick, a birdhouse real quick, and then I get another one who's flying around from here to there, and and do but that's right. And so the way that you said it was, you said, I'm not doing what my degree taught me to do, but I'm doing what I'm here to do, what my life's purpose is here. And I think this is a really important topic. And my belief is this really plugs into intuition, right? And this is what I like to explore, is this sense of feeling so deeply rooted that like, people ask me why I do what I do. And the reason is quite literally because I can't stop. Like, there's no any other reason. Like, sometimes I'll be like, I can't, I'm so whatever. And like, what are you going to do if you don't do this? What are you going to do? Like, nothing. I'm not going to do anything. Like, are you going to retire? No, I'm not retiring. Like this is what I do.
Yeah.
So how, I just can't overemphasize that. Like, how do you know? What about for people who are saying, but how do I know what I'm here to do?
So this is an interesting question. I think that one of the easier ways to do it, and we can talk about how I figured it out, but is as you know what you're not here to do, cross those off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole thing about, the Michelangelo, I mean, the David, that sculptor. He says, they said, how'd you create it? And he said, I just took away everything that wasn't him.
Huh.
Yeah. And so for me, we got to ask, what's the motivation behind the actions we're taking? Is it because of I chose this profession and therefore I'm locked in? Is it because of my degree? Is it because of expectations? Is it because I decided to jack up my bills so much that I have no choice but to work?
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, now I got unfortunately hit with a cancer diagnosis in 2019 and went through the process of surgeries and treatments and everything and was cleared at the end of 2019, but then in April of 2020 it came back. Mm-hmm. And so I had to go through the process again. I was walking on the beach where I live, having a conversation with a dear friend, and he says, how are you holding up? And I said, I'm okay. He says, and he says, BS, you're not. He says, what's going on? And I said, I'm trying to figure out why. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a drinker. No one in my family's ever had cancer. I don't understand. What did I do? Who did I piss off? How did this come about? And he said, you're searching for something you did, something in your past that will rationalize why you were given the cancer. And I said, yeah. And I said, are you finding anything? I said, darkness, pain, but no understanding. He says, what if the reason the cancer was given to you was not because of something you did, but something you were meant to do? What's the message in that? And that is when the light bulb turned on and said, oh my God, if there's a gift in it at all, this is what I'm called to do. It's the one thing that's unique, that I have a culmination of a journey that allows me to say, this is what I'm uniquely equipped to do, to go serve.
Yeah.
And bring this to the world. It's why I wrote the book. It's everything I did. I cut everything else out of the work that I do and said, this is the focus, to light the light for 1 million families to find the path to financial freedom, because I believe it's their birthright and that it is possible. I came as a son of an immigrant who came here at 17 with nothing. We didn't have money, but we created it. And I see so many people that are struggling. And all of a sudden, that's what I got called to do. And I say, I'm in a season of service. And, sitting at dinner with a CEO of a big organization who said to me, if you could do only one thing in your business, what would it be? And I immediately said, speak. And he says, really? He says, why speak? And I said, because it's the only place I can go, speak to a big group of people, give them what I know. And in return, they pay me back by allowing me to see the hope in their eyes again.
Mm.
And that's it. That's all.
Yeah.
Then I knew that's where I belong. So I don't know that it comes easily. Sometimes we push it away. I think intuition, because of the martial arts background and everything, intuition is a gift. But society tells us, especially women, to suppress the gift.
Right.
Because it'll keep us safe. It'll keep us safe in that regard. But it'll also keep us on the path that we are supposed to be on. I think each of us have a unique gift that we're put here to develop and to give to the world. But we get confused by all the pressures, all the expectations, and all the other stuff. And we're afraid to make that decision to take a different path.
Yeah. So before 2019, you were doing all these things still, but you weren't entirely. You were still doing other things, and that's
Yeah,
what happened?
I was still doing other things. I was moving towards this, but it wasn't on the radar. I mean, I was teaching stuff on thought leadership and entrepreneurship and everything. Um, but I didn't feel 100% in flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what that looked like in my life is that, so I'm a CPA. I had a small tax practice and stuff. Is I wouldn't let it go because I felt, oh my God, if I let that go, what happens? So I was holding on to things from the past because they were like security blankets until I finally just said, oh, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. Now, that doesn't mean when I left, I was working for a downtown Los Angeles consulting, one of the largest firms in downtown Los Angeles out of college. And I realized that I was living someone else's life. It's not the life I wanted. I'd been there 5 years, and I literally up and quit on a Friday night at 10 o'clock at night. I walked into the partner's office and said, I'm out. I'm not here on Monday. Okay. Some people would say you're committed. Okay. In hindsight, I mean, that's what I said. I'm committed. Okay.
Right.
In hindsight, it was reckless. So there's a difference if you sit back and say, I'm not doing what I'm placed here to do. That yearning, that tugging, that I'm ignoring, that angst, that friction that's going on, that I'm ignoring. You can't just say, well, I'm going to throw my hands up. I'm going to go this direction.
Right.
Depending on your circumstances. Maybe you're a family with kids and things like that. Well, what that means is, doesn't mean that you can't. It just means you have to have the right plan to transition and move and say, this is the goal and this is where we're going to make this happen. And so back when I did that in the 80s, that was reckless. I wouldn't do it today. And it's not what I recommend people do. But I think that to be sensitive enough and self-aware enough to feel into what really brings you visceral joy becomes important. Sometimes we just are totally unaware of it. I watch people, like I got another friend of mine who is a billionaire, planes, houses, everything, but they're a train wreck waiting to happen because they're not happy. They haven't found the happiness and they keep chasing accomplishments, achievements, and all those things in hopes that they'll find the peace of the happiness that they desire. You know, if you haven't found it when you have planes and homes and billions of dollars and all that stuff, it's probably not in the material stuff. In fact, I can promise you it's not. And that's the difference between being wealthy and being rich. I want you to live a rich life of experiences and feelings. And too often we suppress it. I think we need to be more open to it and have the conversations, if we're in relationships, have the conversations with ourselves about what really allows me to say, I lived it fully and, I did it my way and it wasn't unethical, it wasn't illegal, and I didn't hurt people in the process. Maybe I didn't use my degree. Maybe I didn't follow the path that my parents wanted, but I followed my path and I feel fully complete and be okay with that. But it's going to take, it may take longer for other people to strip some of that away and find that.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of when you're talking about illness too, I mean, I think that is absolutely so common, right? We look for why is this happening? Why is this happening? As opposed to maybe I am not in alignment with something that I'm supposed to be here to do. And it's really, I have a very dear friend who has cancer now. And, there's so much of this that we talk about is like a worthiness issue, right? Because I feel anyway, because when we're not stepping out to do what we're meant to do, yeah, we've got fear about money or fear about these things maybe, but there's also like, but do I deserve to do that? Can I really do that? Don't I have to do all the things that we've been conditioned to do? And we have all these like really bright lights in the world, like all these people who just have messages to bring. and they are literally like under the wall of Jericho, with they just can't see it. It's just all about, but I can't make that, I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I don't deserve, and I can't, and so has this, that, and the other. And it's like, if we could all just learn to say, no, there's a light inside me, and my job is to look into, find that light, and then like let it vibrate, let it shine.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother deal.
Yeah. And I think that what's important is to realize that our light isn't meant for everyone, but it is meant for someone.
Yes.
And that someone's waiting for that light. And there will be those that it doesn't resonate with. And that's okay, because they're not part of our audience. But the one that wants to hear the message, the one that needs to hear the message, is the one that you're actually doing this for. And because they haven't heard what they need to hear from someone else, and they need to hear it from you.
Yeah. Whatever that may be, right? Whether it's money or, whatever.
Doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I remember it can be a statement. It can be a thing. I remember I was with now my wife and I, we have been married 14 years next month. And I was with a amazing young woman before her, but we weren't good for each other. She needed something I couldn't give. I needed something she couldn't give. But here's two good people that wanted to make it work. And we spent a number of years together. And at one point, a dear friend of mine said to me, how long are you going to allow her to occupy the space in your heart that's meant for someone else? And how long are you going to occupy the space in her heart that's meant for someone else?
Wow.
Now, I am in a wonderful marriage, and she is too. And we're still dear friends. And sometimes we just got to turn around and say, I got to walk this path.
Yeah, that's another fabulous example, right? Because how many times do people stay in relationships because they're afraid of being alone? They're like, well, devil you know is better than the one you don't. This is, and again, it's the way we're conditioned. But my God, what are we missing out? What's the opportunity we might be missing out on? That's a fabulous example. And earlier you were talking about how serving, is really like having the attitude towards serving, right? Rather than I got to make this money, it's like, who am I serving? And I really feel like, it's my belief that at our core, we all want to be of service. That is what we want. Like, I don't believe there are really anybody out there that doesn't feel that way beneath all the stress and the conditioning and all of that kind of stuff, right? So, but it's so easy to get thrown off of that because, whenever you start any business, you're starting from a place of like, this is going to be great. And it's going to be awesome. We're going to solve these problems with these people. And then the stress hits, and then the client problems, and then the whatever, all the things. And all of a sudden we're efforting and we're trying to make the money and we're trying to do this and trying to get people to like us and all this kind of stuff. And we've lost that light that was initially kind of drawing us through life instead of, making us push boulders up it.
So true. So true.
Yeah. So tell us about, because I know you had a real moment with your son, your young son, when you were working like a fiend many years ago, that it was really a light bulb moment for you in that arena. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was a single full-time dad, raising him from 5.5 years old. He's by and large probably my life's greatest teacher is being a dad and trying to figure out that whole process. But it was the same year, the year that he came to live with me is the same year that my partners in my firm pushed me out the door and said, hey, we don't want to be partners with you anymore. Because I was going down that road of trying to build the valuation, the test, which is not very non-traditional, which meant that as an accountant, they're behind the desk doing accounting. I'm out there speaking on stages. It was very different. And so I found myself with no clients, no client backlog, no cash flow. I was $300,000 in debt because I just bought a house, but I had this 5.5-year-old boy that I had to take care of. So I did what most people would do and said, well, time to get into the grind. And I got on the treadmill. I put my head down. I started running and getting clients and cash flows coming in. And all right, this looks like it's going to work. We're going to make it. We're going to do okay. And he was about 6 years old. He came running in from school one day. He says, Daddy, I drew a picture of his school one day, today. So I kneeled down to look at this picture and thinking that, here it's going to be this picture of us playing ball and this and that. But it was a picture of me standing in front of 2 computer screens and a phone in each ear. And in that moment, this 6-year-old boy gave me a mirror into my soul to say, Dad, you're failing me. Mm. And this tug at me was this tug of, but I have to do this to put the roof over our heads, to do the things we want to do. And I had all these people saying, you need work-life balance. That's the problem. You need work-life balance. And I struggled with that whole concept until I finally realized, I can give him a bunch of excuses about we need the profits so we can do the things. But in his eyes, if he understood it at 5.5 years old, he'd have looked at me and said, Dad, I don't need your profits. I don't even know what they are. But what I do know is I need your presence. And that was a failure that I wasn't prepared to do. And as I struggled with this idea of work-life balance, it dawned on me that balance isn't what we're looking for. Balance doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's this idea that, hey, I can have weight on one side, weight on the other side, and they're playing a tug of war. But that's friction in life. That's stress in life. And trying to live a portion of your life with one identity and a portion of your life is another identity, and living these different buckets just doesn't work. And it wasn't until it dawned on me that balance isn't really what we're searching for. Harmony is. And harmony comes from living intentionally. Harmony comes from saying, no, this time is where I'm dedicating. So like I literally took a calendar and said, here's the calendar for the month, for the quarter. All the red zones, Jeremy, they're yours. They will not move. Intentionally, those are yours. You can bank on. Every other color on the calendar, you can change to red anytime. And now all of a sudden, our relationship starts to transform. Not because I had any different work ethic, not because I had any different element other than the fact that I was much more openly intentional about how I was spending the time. This was the birth of what became known as the Money Machine, the book that was written about, because what I realized is that until I was able to separate my earnings from the efforts to earn it, I would always be imprisoned by the treadmill of earnings.
Okay. Say that again.
Until I was able to separate my earnings from the efforts to earn it, I would be imprisoned by the treadmill of earnings. In other words, I would constantly be running the race. And the only way to make it is to run faster, harder, longer. But really that leads to dis-ease, breakdown, and burnout. It doesn't lead to freedom. It doesn't lead to a life of choice or a freedom-based life. What leads to a freedom-based life is when we have the ability to make choice every single day when we wake up and put our feet on the ground. And how you do that is you build a money machine outside of you. Now, I didn't understand that really at the time, but it was the thing that I then was obsessed about. But the power of it that got born out of this conversation or this situation with Jeremy came full circle during the cancer, because I was able to shut everything down. I stopped my businesses. I stopped everything, and I let the machine run so I could fight the demon, so I could beat it. And I didn't, I had the psychological stress of cancer, the physiological stress of cancer, the mental, the spiritual, the energetic, but I didn't have the financial stress.
So when you first had that revelation, right, and he's 5.5, you're still in financial stress. I mean, you hadn't come out of it, right? So how did you now knew that you needed to be available for him? You had this shift in perspective, that some of us get. It's like that aha moment. Many of us have had, gotten them many times in our lives, right? But how did you shut down the stress, or how did you manage the part of self that's saying, but you gotta make money, what do you can't just throw.
Yeah. So I think that what happened was I started to realize that my clients and I had a currency, and that currency wasn't the same as the currency I had with my son. So the currency with my clients was money, but the currency with my son was moments.
Mm.
And so what I started to do, but what I had to do is this, and I still will do it today. And sometimes I fall down on it, but is that if I'm going to give anything to a moment, then I have to give it all. Otherwise, I don't give anything to it. So what it allowed me to do is that when I'm with the clients on the calendar, I'm with the clients and I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And now, as long as I had enough client work, we knew that the money was coming in, and then I had to get the money to work for me to give me that freedom. So I wasn't stressing to try to get to the next trough of cash. But then I knew that at 2:30 every day, I was going to school to pick him up, and we would walk home together because the school was up the street where we lived at that point. But that was the way I lived, because those moments meant so much more to him. And so even if it was, hey, well, we come back from school, we spend 30 minutes or so, him getting a snack, this and that. He's now got to go do his homework and stuff. I'm going to go do some work, and then we're going to do something for dinner. And those times are just him. And what it allowed me to do is to just compartmentalize it a bit. So instead of, because how many times do we go, you're out with your spouse and they're constantly checking the phone or any of that type of stuff, and you're really not there.
Yeah.
And so the value of the moment doesn't matter. Or with the client, you're thinking about the next client call, or I got to get home. I mean, she wants me to pick up milk and you're not there. And so what I found is that I was able to navigate it better when I was fully committed and intentional to that moment, and being very open and communicating with, at the time, with Jeremy about, hey, here's the moments, and if we need to change anything. But the same thing with my wife now, is that we actually plan a year in advance, all our vacations. And we know, and they're absolutely immovable. In fact, we have a vacation planned that we're going back to Italy in October. And our niece, for some reason, decided she was going to plan her wedding. Now and we don't know why she's doing it this way. It's very short notice, like four months wedding plan. She just got engaged, and she wants to, and she's doing it while we're in Italy. And we said, unfortunately, we will not be there. Yeah. She knew about our trip, but she chose to put the wedding there. It is not movable. That's the commitment we made. God forbid, if it was something crazy, but she knew it. She decided to do it. That's fine. We will not move the trip. This is the magic in our lives, and it's committed.
Yeah. And what you're really talking about is being in the present moment, no matter what moment that is, bringing all of your presence to that moment. It's like that saying, in this moment, all is well.
Yeah.
Right. There is no moment that all isn't well in. No. If you are genuinely in that moment.
There's nothing we can affect outside of that moment. It's the only thing we have the ability to have agency over.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I want you to tell us another story, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Because there was this story, and I can relate to it tremendously. It was the story of when you got caught up in a Ponzi scheme, right? As a financial person.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have a similar story. I got, caught up in a scam, and I wasn't a financial person at that time, but I prided myself on, being on top of my money all the time. So tell us the story, and then I've got a couple of specific questions for you about it.
Yeah. So I got involved in an investment. This is around 2005. that ultimately it turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. And me and two friends that were in it, we lost over $4.5 million. I lost 1/3 of everything I had. And,
Wow.
and being that CPA, that financial guy, let me tell you the stories I told myself.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what I want
like,
to know.
oh my God. I mean, the idea of the whole thing, of what it meant for me. Like, I have no business advising people. I have no business with money. I'm an idiot. You know, all the things that I said that were just beating me up. It certainly wasn't making me feel any better. But the challenge is that, look, things are going to happen, and there was three of us in this. There was more than that in here, but the two buddies that I knew, one of them had been retired already. So all he did was shrink his life down a bit, because he had the least amount of money in there, and just changed his life and kept on living. Just said, all right, chalk it up. Okay. The other one had a fair amount of money in it, and he was the one that got both of us in it. He had been the original one in it. And he had planned his whole life around it.
Oh, wow.
Well, he spiraled into resentment, bitterness. He destroyed his marriage. He destroyed his business. He started drinking. And we're talking 2005, and I'm going to say in the last 3 to 4 years, he's finally started to come out of it.
Wow.
And then I was kind of the same. I was starting to get bitter and resentful, and, oh my God, how am I going to recover and everything? And then the one that just kind of shrunk his life, he looked at me and says, Jeremy's old enough to understand what happened, but you haven't explained it to him. And he's going to watch his dad now, knowing that some sort of adversity hit.
Yeah.
And he's going to decide how he's going to deal with adversity based on how you're dealing with adversity. And you got to ask yourself what lesson you want to give him. And,
wow.
And so I had to look at it and say, well, okay. The only way that I could navigate it then was to realize that, one, I did have a role in it. Because it was so easy to look at this person who I testified in the grand jury. He went away for 9.5 years and everything, and say, he did it. He did it to me. And blame. The problem is, there's nothing wrong with saying that. It's absolutely true. He did do it, but I had a role in it.
Yeah.
I had a piece of it. I, one, decided to go into it. 2, I ignored my rules. 3, I ignored the voice, okay, that was in my head saying, this sounds way too good to be true. And I suppressed it. So until I was willing to acknowledge my role in it, there was no way I was going to heal from it. And there was no way I was going to grow from it. And there was no way I was going to come out of it. And so I had to look at it. And Jeremy was the catalyst to allow me to step back and say, look, I got to do something for him, even if if I'm not looking at it through my eyes. And so once I was able to do that, then I could sit back and say, okay, what was my role and what's the lessons? And from that, I then have the ability to move from it. Now, 18 months after that whole thing happened, not only did we recover, but we tripled what we had lost.
Wow.
Now, it would have never happened had I not been willing to accept my role, not the blame, but my role in this journey. It makes it no less painful. Trust me. Okay. It doesn't make me any better, but it makes me better for it, because the things I teach today, the things I write about today, were born out of it. And I look at it and I go, y'all, if I paid for like 3 PhDs from Yale and Harvard with my mistake, you shouldn't be paying for it. You should just take the lessons.
Yeah. Read the book.
And that's the thing that I think I didn't speak about it openly at first because I was embarrassed, and because I thought what a reflection it would be as a financial guy to have this happen and all that stuff. And and but then I realized that there's actually great lessons in it. I'm not I'm not perfect. I screw
Yeah.
it up. I make bad decisions. I'm just the same. The question is how we're going to respond to it, how we're going to react to it. And there's some times that I don't respond right, and I have to right that ship and go, oh, that was less than me.
Yeah. I think that's so important because that we're in an epidemic of really not wanting to share
Yeah.
all the horrible things, and I remember, I felt very similarly. I had to file bankruptcy, and it was, there's so, and even, even the whole, my whole experience of my TED Talk and spending the night in jail and all these things was something I had such deep shame about. But if we don't share those things, then nobody has permission to share I mean, that's really the reason I became a psychotherapist to begin with, is I just wanted at least a room where you
Yeah.
could come in and just take your shame off like a coat, leave it on the couch, and then walk out into your life. And what you tied it to really is, you said, if I don't take responsibility, I won't be able to learn from it.
No.
That's such an important thing, and such a simple, what I love about this interview is you're just saying some things so simply, like just making some points so powerful. Like, that's motivation in and of itself. Like, who is in the place where you're blaming someone right now, or feeling, bitter or whatever. And I think, it's not like it happens like that, right?
No.
Like, I have places in my life where that happens, and it's like a battle. Like, how do I move? But there's an awareness, like, I gotta move past this, because if I don't, not because I'll be a better person if I don't, not because it's the right thing to do, but because if I don't move past this, I will not have learned from it. I
Yeah.
will not have grown. And then I won't get myself to the next level of whatever that is:
Yeah.
intimacy, financial freedom, right?
I think if we ask the question, which is basically the question that was asked with the Ponzi scheme, and the question that was asked about the cancer, is that if we ask the question of, instead of why is this happening to me, what is this meant to give me?
Yeah.
You start to look at it, and it's art. It's now whether the reason that I got the cancer was because of what I'm doing today, I don't know. But in my heart and soul, it makes sense, and it allows me to compartmentalize the cancer and make it look at it as valuable in my life, and to
Yeah.
sit back and go, all right, all right, I hear you, I get it. Now this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so, but I think we need to ask ourselves, what's the growth that comes out? We go to the gym. The gym doesn't feel good. We put stress and strain on the muscles, but why? So we can grow. It's no different in life, and I think yet we're afraid to do that. And you know what? Just as much as I get injured at the gym, we get injured in life. We make mistakes, and it's this idea that we need to be perfect or we might be judged that I think is, man, it's so damaging. And I saw it the most was when I had the school, the martial arts school, for 11 years, and the kids, and what I remember, a kid that was getting ready to test for his black belt. Man, he came in tears, Brad, and he just said, he looked at me and he just said, I just want my dad to say he's proud of me once.
Oh,
And like, it ripped my heart out. And I
yeah.
said, and I had to look at him and I go, you're going to get on that mat in front of people when we add it up that have 125 years experience on that mat. Your
Mm.
dad hasn't had 125 minutes. I said, you've got 125 years of pride in front of you right now.
Oh,
and we'll carry you through the whole thing. I mean, I want to
Wow.
reach out to the dad and just strangle him.
Yeah.
But, I don't think that we realize the impact of some of those little things that we take on and take in, and they can keep us from being everything we're meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little things. Like I said, I have an identical twin, and he's 3 minutes younger than me, and school came easy to me. And it's really strange, but in his eyes, he felt like he lived in my shadow, because my mom would, when she was alive, she would like, well, if Mel can do it, why can't you? Man. But the funny thing is, what he didn't know until later in life, I said, you were always my inspiration. You skied first, you did football first, you did track first. I followed you. But he didn't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of this stuff, it really takes us away from our intuition, our intuitive knowing. It's all that trying to keep up, and this idea of, it's so damaging, this idea that we have to be perfect. And even that means like, if I lost my temper, or if I didn't, do whatever, and I sometimes, when I'm talking to women, who grew up like I did in the, I can bring home the bacon fried in a pan era, like we are all that, and no, can't be vulnerable, and, all the things, right? And everybody thinks we're rock stars, but, inside we feel like a hot mess, and so I'll frame it this way, because nobody wants to be this, if you really think about it, that part of the personality that wants everything, that thinks that they are perfect, or gets, I should say it this way, that gets so crushed when they're not perfect. It's really a narcissistic part of ourselves, because why, what? Oh, just you? No, just me. I mean, you all can make those mistakes, but not me, and that will sometimes pierce it, because nobody wants to be that, right? Nobody wants to be seen that way. And minutes before that, they can say, oh, no, I'm just such the most horrible person in the world. And it's like, do you see how narcissistic that statement is? How can it be narcissistic? I feel horrible. Because you think you're the only one that shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we are human beings.
Well, and because we're human, we'll make mistakes.
Exactly.
And 99% of those mistakes are not terminal.
No.
It's just not, and you own up to it. You made look, yeah, this was going back a lot of years. I was doing a webinar. Now, this was for a national association where they gave me the Lifetime Achievement Award, which meant that everyone knew me. And we had 200 plus people on this webinar. It was go-to webinar, and this is the first time that I was doing the tech and the talent. Usually I would just show up and speak, and they would run the whole thing. It was 9:00 in the morning. I roll out of bed, and it's just me and slides and my voice. That's it. So I didn't think about anything. I have my Superman pajama bottoms on. I strap in. I got no shirt on, and I start this webinar. And literally 2 minutes into the webinar, I see the chat saying, Mel's naked. He's not wearing a shirt. And like, I look, and somehow I turned the webcam on. Like, I mean, Post-it notes were never so meaningful until that time. Like, I got a Post-it note and slapped it on the camera and said, I'm just gonna keep on going. And I just kept on going. And the crazy thing is that, one, I sold like $30,000 worth of services on that webinar. So I don't know if that means
maybe you were lifting a lot. Maybe
and they have asked me back. They've asked me back almost every year to keynote their conference. In fact, I'm going back again this year to keynote. And I'm like going, yo, if I can survive that, there's very few things that we're going to do that are so bad that we can't recover from.
Yeah.
And people have short memories. And so I think that what's really important is the intent behind it. the behavior might have been wrong or mistaken, but if the intent was good, then we need to give the intent much more weight than the behavior.
Because that's what other people are doing anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, nobody's like walking around, I mean, we're too self-absorbed anyway as a human race to like be so worried about each other's mistakes. Right?
Yeah.
So, so tell me, what do you think intuition is? What do you think it is?
You know what? I think that it's a combination of feeling, knowing, and believing. I'll relate it to the martial arts. My 3rd degree black belt test in Japan. I had to kneel down in front of my sensei, and he drew a sword, and he had it above my head, and he was either going to cut down or he was going to cut across, and I had to get out of the way. You can't do it by visual. It's too late. You have to do it with a belief, a knowing, a feeling that comes from deep inside. And we all have it, but we've all suppressed it because society told us to, because of teachings and logic and everything. I think that women are, fortunately and unfortunately, more naturally intuitive than men. And why I say unfortunately is because I think women feel more, I don't want to say threatened, but feel more uncertain because they always have to be aware of their surroundings, of what's going on for their own safety and everything. And I think what that does is it develops those inner feelings, those things at a level that is far greater than the male ego that gets in the way. And if I would have been hit by that sword, that would have been my ego that got me hit by the sword.
Oh, yeah. So good. Right.
And so I think that there is this thing, and my wife says it, she goes, you just have a radar about people. Like I'll walk away from meeting someone, I go, can't put my finger on it. There's something about it. And inevitably something comes up down the road and she goes, how did you know? I said, don't know. I spent a lot of time reading people doing that because of the background and everything. But we will tend to ignore it. How many, just from a safety standpoint, how many women, because I used to teach this and I have a charitable foundation for abuse and violence against women and children. And how many women have ever in their life felt uncomfortable but allowed a man into an elevator, steel cage, soundproof, with them and felt uncomfortable about it? Because they didn't want to be seen in a bad light, because we say to ourselves, don't be silly, or whatever it is. And I think that we stop listening to that voice, that feeling. Now, it can go very far to the other side of paranoia, but I think that there is a level of knowing, there's a level of feeling, there's a level of belief that if we cultivated that more, I think we'd make better decisions in business, better decisions in relationships. We would be more proactive in our journey, and we would look at what we deserve in a different light.
One might even say if we incubated it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and I think it's interesting with women because I totally agree, in some ways women are more attuned to it, but so conditioned against it. And I used to retell the story of Red Riding Hood, and I would say, well, I know why she was eaten by the wolf, because, she felt guilty. She didn't want to question her grandmother. That's not nice. That's not respectful. and she had promised her mother that she would give the treats. And, we're trained to defer. Oh, if she's older than me. If she says she's a
Yep.
grandmother, then she's a grandmother, right? Like, at no point, like, she knew, Red Riding Hood knew, because she said it out loud. She said, your eyes are so big. She said it out loud 3 times, your ears are so big. But every time she took a step closer, right? She never put the thing down and said, oh, I brought you some goodies. I got to go. Enjoy. And that's really, I think, how we've or at least one way, I'm not the authority on it, but how we've disconnected so much, and
Yeah.
women in particularly, that you've mentioned a couple of times today.
There's a great book. It's an older book by Gavin DeBecker. He was a violence psychologist. It's called The Gift of Fear. And he talks about the pre-incident indicators of things like this. And he tells it through the story of primarily one woman, but a couple of women, where they said, I didn't see it coming. He says, let's break that down. But it wasn't that they didn't see it coming. It was the fact that they ignored the intuition and the signs at a level. And it wasn't to shame. It was to empower and inform, to say, hey, don't ignore these. When you feel this, it's the same thing that with my Ponzi scheme. That voice in my head was intuition saying, something doesn't feel right, but I went anyways.
Right. Yeah. No, I bought a house that way. That's what led to me going bankrupt. I bought a house, and then I got involved in a real estate scam because I couldn't afford the house, but the house was, it's what other people have. That's the dream. That's the next step. That's the, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great stuff. So tell us, I know you wrote this great book,
Yep.
and I don't know what other offerings you want to share with the audience, but you have so much to offer. What is it you'd like to draw people's attention to?
Yeah, I think my work in general, the book would be great. It's Building Your Money Machine. It is a financial
tell
book.
us what the money machine is. Say a little more about that.
So the whole idea is that we're trained, we are indoctrinated and raised, get a good job, get a good profession, get a good career, earn. And the problem with that is that we believe that is the path to freedom. And whether you're an entrepreneur or a wage earner, your freedom isn't at the hands of how much you earn, unless you take what you earn and you use it to separate your earnings from your efforts, the machine. So we need to have the ability to earn the career, the profession, the business, whatever it is, the job, because that's the fuel. But if we don't take that fuel and use it to build something that doesn't require us to be on the treadmill, we will always have to earn. And it's not how much you earn that matters, okay? Because there's plenty of people, look at Mike Tyson, look at Nicolas Cage, look at Burt Reynolds, all of them made hundreds of millions of dollars and they all went broke, living check to check, okay? And so how do you do that was the answer to the book. Now, the other side of that is when you look at the book, I also realized that chasing the money without chasing a life is a mistake. This is what ends up with people that create self-worth based on their net worth, and they wonder why they're miserable, even though they could buy anything they want.
Yeah.
But it's an empty existence. And so the book actually talks at the very beginning is let's define your life. Everything needs to start with a life by design, the vision for life. Meaning that I'm not talking about the stuff, I'm talking about life, the relationships, the health, the all of that. And then we put the price tag on it. Then we give you the tools to build a machine so it will fund that price tag. And at the end of the book, we bring life back into it because we aren't building this for us. We're building it for generations. Whether it's the generations that acquire the stuff or the machine, or whether the generations acquire the skill set, which is more important, because I talk about skill sets before assets in the book, but more importantly, allow them to acquire the possibility, to see that there's a path and that you become the role model. So the money machine is a money book, but it's a money book wrapped in life and how do you build a rich life that is of your own doing so you can live what I call a freedom-based life, the life of choice. Every day that I get up, I am blessed to put my feet on the floor and know that every day I get to make that choice. And if I choose to not turn the computer on, if I choose to decide that I'm not going to record the videos, or I choose that we're just going to take off, then we do. And that's the gift I want everyone to have. Because it's not that you would make the choice, it's just that you can make the choice.
So that might be the answer to my next question, which is if there's one thing that you could, if you just wanted people to understand one thing, you just want to shake this one thing into them, what is it you want people to know more than anything?
I think the thing that I want, I talk about this a lot, is this idea of legacy. Because I hear so many people when they'll come to me to talk about their finances and how do I do this, and they say, I want to leave a legacy. I said, no, you don't. You want to live a legacy. The problem with this idea of leaving legacies, you're saying I'm going to collect a bunch of stuff. I'm going to just collect it and collect it and collect it, and then I'm going to leave it behind when I go. Where's the gift in that? Yeah. I said, the legacy isn't in the stuff. The legacy is in the living. It's how we live. So legacy to me is created in each and every moment. You and I having a conversation. If there's anything that I did that shifted something in you, that stirred something in the audience, that's what legacy is. It's not some statue. It's not some name in a building. It's not a big bank account. Yes, those contribute and they help. But the fact is that our legacy is measured by what we have left inside people when we interact, and not when we leave this place. And I think that when we do that, we start to live life understanding that each moment of our life has the capacity and the capability to create legacy. And if we did that, maybe we give each moment the reverence it deserves, and know that it's a gift to give a moment of your life away, and that when someone gives you a moment of their life, that it's a present to you and that you'll cherish it. And I think if we did that, that's true legacy.
Well, I think I just found the intro to this episode. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you, Mel, and your time and, everything you teach. It's just it's a blessing to just be able to absorb it.
Oh my God. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we were able to work it out and get it on the calendar.
Yeah, me too.